It is 8 o'clock. I want to welcome you to our next session for the evening, where we have one of our, my advisory board members. We have our Canadian representative extraordinaire, fearless leader of the Black fundraising group in Canada and Giving Circle. Nneka Allen. There's so many things that you do. That's only one little corner of your life. That's not even your day job. Everybody has the ability to talk, so just make sure that you are muted. I'm just going to run through one time really quickly to make sure everybody's muted. Everybody has the ability to talk, but you are now all muted. Just be mindful of that as y'all are in the background. So Nneka, tonight you are going to be talking with us about authenticity. I'm so excited about this conversation. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who are just joining us in this 8 o'clock hour, welcome to day 1, now session 3 of our Rooted pop-up virtual conference. We decided to do this conference because with all of the madness going on and conferences being canceled left and right, many of our opportunities to come together in community in person were thwarted. So we said, to hell with that, we're taking it to the internet. And so we decided to focus on our care, our mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being, our personal well-being and professional development. And so there's lots of really good stuff happening out around fundraising, how to, but here we're going to talk about how to be. And so, Nneka, I'm so excited to turn this over to you tonight. So welcome. For those of you who have not registered for the Rooted Retreat, this is just a taste of what you will experience with us over 2.5 days. Right now, we are still holding to our July 22nd date, but we will be sending out a survey to everyone to see if we need to move it out to October, but we haven't made that call yet. But either way, it is happening, God willing, in 2020, because we deserve to be together. So, Nneka, I will mute myself and turn this over to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kish. Welcome, everybody. I hope that you're enjoying the pop-up conference so far. I know I really enjoyed the last session, and it's really interesting. Kish and I we met in New Orleans. I think that was about 2.5-ish years ago. Is it 3 years now? 3 years ago now. And she really knocked my socks off and impressed the mess out of us. And we had to know her. And we were, really pleased to get to know her. And then again, saw her in Toronto shortly thereafter for AFP's Leadership Academy. And it was really there that we forged, a relationship and began to get to know one another. And it's been a really wonderful opportunity to know her. I'll tell you, this session was Kish's idea, absolutely. She called me up one evening and said, Nneka, I need you to consider doing a session, 30 minutes. And I'll tell you, I told her, let me think about it. It's not really my jam, but let me think about it. And then I did, and I called her back. Yeah, I called her back and I said, I don't think I'm going to do it because what I'm thinking about right now, what's on my mind is a little on the heavy side. And I'm not sure that's going to get it for 30 minutes. And she said, well, just tell me what you're thinking about. And so I told her a little bit. She said, oh, no, we're doing this. We're going to start this conversation. And so that's really how I view our time today, as the beginning of a conversation about something that I think is really very important and integral to who we are as individuals and as Black women or women of color. So thank you, Kish, for pushing me. I think there is great value in having strong Black women or strong women of color around you who are prepared to push you in the direction you should be going. So a little bit about who I am. I'm a 6th-generation Canadian, African, Indigenous, German, and Irish descent. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, across from Detroit. The bulk of my family still lives there. And I'm a mom of a 24-year-old daughter who's about to get married. Definitely the best work of my life. I've worked in nonprofit for 20 years. I started in community museums, and I spent the last 15 years working in healthcare. So as you can imagine, right now is particularly a busy time for us as we are sort of on the front lines of the work being done here in London. That's where I live now. So London is about 2 hours from Windsor and 2 hours from Toronto. And I've been here for about 7 years. I am the founder of the Empathy Agency, which is exactly what Naima was talking about, identifying a gap and just filling it. And what I've noticed in the 20 years of my career in nonprofit is there really isn't a true space for women of color or people of color where they can actually belong. And so I've started thinking about what does it really require of organizations to begin to create intentional space so that people like us who are well educated and have great things to contribute can come in and contribute. And so that's essentially the work that my agency does. And so I do that, obviously. That's sort of like my side hustle, I suppose. So that's a little bit about me. I want to give a little bit of context about where I'm coming from as we talk about the aftermath and what happens when you show up as your authentic self. So I think, for me, it was always very difficult to hone in on exactly who I was and be confident sharing that in whatever space I was going into, particularly white spaces. And that's not because I didn't have really strong, wonderful Black people around me contributing to my identity. Quite the opposite. I had a plethora of Black people around me contributing to my identity. But what was very tangible in the Canadian context for me was how solidified, a white preference is, and how I was the opposite of that. And so it took me probably about, 25 years, 30 years of my life to get to a point where I just decided that I would not relinquish who I was as I was entering into an environment. And so committing to myself first to stay true to me. And that has been very difficult. And so I want to sort of talk about that a little bit, couched in a story. And so when I started to think about which story I would share, I started with one of the most outrageous stories that has happened to me. And as I began to develop my thoughts around that, I actually decided not to tell the outrageous story, but to tell what I think is a very fundamental story. And so I'm going to talk to you about 15 years ago when I decided that I would stop relaxing my hair. And I was a professional fundraiser at the time. And so I'd spent, 5-6 years, with straight-ish hair, some version of straight hair. And I decided I would stop doing that. And the first time that I entered work with my hair natural, interestingly enough, I ran into the president of our union. And he happened to be in our boardroom. And I walked in to get something, and he looked at me, and he looked at my hair, and then he looked at my face, and then he laughed. And in that moment, I just looked at him and I said, "Be very careful." And I left. And I went and spoke to someone in HR, and I also spoke to my direct report, my boss. And not because I wanted them to necessarily do anything specific about it, but because I thought they ought to know that this was my experience. So I did that. Some hours passed. I had to go back to my boss's office for something unrelated. And when I got to her office, the director of HR was in her office, who had since heard about what had transpired. And she raised the issue. And, I'm really fortunate that I've been taught to listen twice as much as I talk. So I gave her the opportunity to really tell me what she thought about what transpired. And what I was able to learn in that period of time were several things. One, you know, she was unprepared to accept my reality. Two, there was no space to consider that this might be racism. And three, she really wanted to drive home the point that, you know, I really should think twice about the things that I bring forward as issues. And so that didn't stop me from wearing my hair natural. I continued to wear my hair natural. I frankly disagreed with her. And the issue dropped at that moment for a period of time, but it absolutely reoccurred down the road in various forms with the same person. And so what it's interesting. Ta-Nehisi Coates said racism is not merely a simplistic hatred. It is more often broad sympathy toward some and broader skepticism toward others. And Desmond Cole is a Canadian author and journalist. And he wrote that that definition of racism is particularly relevant in Canada because we live in a country that favorably measures itself against the brash American brand of racism. And so this is the environment in which I found myself trying to develop my fundraising skills and trying to, get an education in fundraising, get my CFRE. And looking back in retrospect, I think that there are a number of typical responses when we do show up as our authentic selves. Now, these small caveat, the typical responses by and large are not positive, but my raising them is not to dissuade you from continuing in your authenticity, because ultimately my experience has been that despite the negative responses, there is one response internally that that is most valuable, and that is pride in your own identity. There are these wins that happen inside you when you do show up as yourself and you know you're standing in your truth. So I say that with that caveat. But the typical responses I have found have been violence, and that can take a variety of forms, including verbal, emotional, psychological, and of course physical in their worst forms. And that could look like intimidation, thinly veiled threats, ultimatums, denial of the experience of racism, which, happened to me. Well, Nneka, are you really sure that that's what, that's why he was laughing? Like, are you sure about that? Protecting the issue, or projecting, the issue onto the victim, right? So you should probably be really careful about how you talk about these things, right? Like, after all, I'm pretty sure he's not really interested in your hair. Ignoring the impact, right? So as though my experience and my view of what's transpired is invalid, doesn't matter. And then silence, right? Silence can be violent, right? The inability to affirm what you see as unjust, right? That can be very violent for the person on the receiving end. The second thing is white solidarity. So the unification of white people. So somehow between the time when he left and I told my boss and one of the people in HR, they got together and told the HR director, who decided that they would reform the narrative to suit them and then project it on me, right? The reversal of sympathy, which is often, a refrain. Isn't that something, white solidarity? Oh, it in the workplace, absolutely. The reversal of sympathy. So manipulating the situation so that the person who actually was most impacted by the thing that happened all of a sudden becomes the aggressor somehow, and the person who was the aggressor is now somehow, the victim, right? And then the white solidarity that often forms around that victimhood. Empty words or silence. So the white people who consider themselves to be progressive and sit silent as they watch the unjust thing go by. So the HR director was in my boss's office, and my boss did not say anything to contradict what the HR director was saying, right? So silence is also a form, or empty words. Well, are you making too much of this? Are you exaggerating? Maybe we didn't really understand what was happening here, right? Empty words. And then, this is a very real response, the fear that other people of color have. And this, I totally understand, and, try to resist even myself when I see it happening to other people. So the fear, the fear that treatment that they've observed happening to you could easily be turned on them, right? That could paralyze people into doing nothing, saying nothing. Lacking strength in numbers, that is a real serious issue here in London, particularly in Windsor, even in Toronto, the most diverse city in Canada. Lacking of numbers. Silence, because it's safer, right? It's safer sometimes just to be silent. Like, how can I get out of this situation? And so those are some of the typical responses, but I would really love to know, if there are other responses that people who are listening have experienced. And I certainly want to talk about the aftermath. And the aftermath is the area where I hope to focus, because I think we don't spend enough time talking about what happens to us after these things happen, right? We spend a lot of time talking about the thing that happened, the response to the thing that happened, but then in the aftermath, I have found, great isolation, reputational damage, stereotyping, further division, lies, constructive dismissal in some instances, inequities and unfairness, and ultimately, you find yourself, having to make decisions about whether or not to stay or leave. And sometimes the decision to leave is the best decision, but the circumstances that gave rise to the reason for you to leave should never have existed in the first place, right? So I fully understand that notion of the grief that comes with having to make really difficult decisions that are rooted in and grounded in discrimination. And so understanding the aftermath, what do we do to support one another? How do we show up for one another? So I see a couple of comments. Your experience is real, yeah. And what's to keep them from happening again in another workplace? That's absolutely right. So the fear and the grief that we feel leaving, doesn't just go away because we end up, at another organization. That exact same thing can manifest in another form quite easily. And so wanted to talk a little bit about how do we support each other. For me, what I've experienced and what has been most helpful to me is people who are prepared to listen to the people who are most impacted, ask how you can help them. Like sometimes there's just some really basic things that they need or they could use to support them. Acknowledging and validating what has happened, like really validating the thing that they understand to be their experience. Challenging the dominant narrative, because the dominant narrative can overtake everything and leads only to the further isolation of the person who's been victimized. Be brave and resist fear. Stand with people of color. Stand with them and then size up the environment. Yes, last night at happy hour, we talked a little bit about the environment and how do you size it up. And, it's funny, I was thinking about that over the course of the last 24 hours. And one of the things that I do when I go into interviews, or into any white spaces where I want people to feel me, feel who I am, I always let my hair go. It's always the full fro. Always. Because
Nneka, why do you make that choice?
what's that?
Why do you make that choice? Because to me, that is a very like pointed. That's like, we don't wait until the last round to ask questions. We asking questions in round one.
That's right. And so like last night we were talking about, asking questions about, are you ready for, a person of color to be in your organization, asking questions to try and suss out where they're at. And I had said, in some instances, asking questions won't suss that out. I can tell you for sure, if you wear your hair natural, you'll find something out. Something. You may not find it all out, but how people respond to that, I find, is always very informative to me. I loved what Naima said about helping to build capacity for new voices. And I think that looks like solidarity. I think that looks like all of the things that I've just said, standing with people of color, resisting the dominant narrative, being brave and resisting fear, paying attention. I think the biggest part here for me is paying attention to your mental and physical health. And so, it can be difficult to do that when you're in these circumstances, which is the reason why it's really important to have a great network around you, women who care about you, who can say to you, the toll that this is taking on you looks like this to me, so that you can maybe take that in and maybe make some different decisions, maybe jump out of the situation sooner than you otherwise would. In my case, a recent scenario has, developed high blood pressure for me. Maybe if there were people to look into the situation sooner, I could have jumped out sooner and avoided that. But I find, for me, when I'm really trying to create space for who I am and for people who look like me, which I take very seriously, I feel like this sense of going for broke, right? Like never wanting to give in, never wanting to give up.
And that's like exhausting over a certain amount of time, isn't it? And y'all, you can unmute yourself if you want to jump in, because I know that Nneka will want y'all to kind of not just be on chat, but to talk as well. But that has to be exhausting. And one of the things that came up for me when you were talking about this litmus test, when Michaela said it was a litmus test, and Kiana said that in her in her current position, she did the same thing. She was like, here I am. It's a wonderful litmus test. But some of us have kind of grown up professionally on the more conservative end, right? Like we were all given some messages about what is acceptable, I put that in quotation marks, in the workplace. And so even though in our heart of hearts, we want to be able to show up powerfully in the way that makes us feel best about ourselves, we might also be holding the financial responsibility that might butt up against that.
Yeah.
Or or other responsibilities that we may have, or being from a city or a town where you don't want to become known, because folk will label you in a minute, and you can't seem to shake the label off as that person. Whether you're a Black woman, you're a Latino, you're Indigenous, etc. Like you can get labeled quick, fast, and it's harder for us to shake that label depending on how you show up in the world. So how do we navigate that decision to go, yeah, I'm gonna test this out right quick, because if y'all cannot, if this is unsettling for you, then that indicates so many other things I can't even see. So how do you help us, particularly those of us who are still trying to find our way and find our footing in our own voice, to be able to kind of navigate that?
Mm-hmm. So I love what you said yesterday about, understanding who your audience is. And so I think that, there are a variety of ways that you can, articulate your authenticity. Like there's a spectrum of it, right? You can, maybe it is wearing your hair out, and maybe that's a 10, But maybe also, you know, it's, you know, wearing, you know, some African jewelry, or I don't know, right? Like maybe it's something a little less obvious, but it is an articulation of your authenticity. So, you know, the way I approach the way I dress when I go out into the world is really about making a statement. And I do think very clearly about what you said last night. Who is the audience? And, you know, I think if you're young in your career, it's far more difficult. To take some of the risks that more senior people can take. And maybe not. I mean, natural hair is becoming, I mean, that example is maybe not the best one for today, you know, today's age, because more and more people are wearing their hair natural. And I will say, even in today, like my experience now in my employment, I don't have those issues. Like I can wear my hair however I want, right? And there's very little issue with it. But I do think that there's a spectrum. So I think always thinking about the things that help articulate a part of who you are, so that people can see that. I think that validates who you were created to be. And I think that we need that. Does that make sense, Kish?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I know Michaela wanted to jump in with a question. So
Sorry.
Michaela, and we'll go to Joy.
Hi, y'all. So I had a question piggybacking on that same concept of authenticity. Recently, I had an opportunity to interview for a development director position in my company, which awesomely I was granted, so it was great. But an older Black woman who mentors me on the job, she recommended that I really tone down my appearance for the sake of the interviews. So we had a search committee and the whole thing. So she specifically said, I know you love your big earrings and I know you love your flashy colors, like your oranges and so forth. But for this interview, I need you to wear, like, just go conservative. Pearls, suit, just be very, very muted, because you want them to be able to hear you and not be distracted by that stuff. Once you're in the position, and like you said, once you kind of achieve some seniority, you can kind of let loose. And it was a little bit conflicting, because it felt a little bit inauthentic, but I understood what she was saying. So how do you draw that line and navigate between wanting to be heard by the audience that you're speaking to, but also being true to yourself and just not having to put on a charade so much?
Yeah, you know, that's really interesting. So in that instance, for me personally, so first let me just say, I'm not wearing pearls. I don't care who's recommending it. I'm not wearing nay. But I hear her message to you, which is, I want you to be seen. I don't want them to be distracted by anything, right? And so, you know, I think in that instance, you absolutely can, you know, modify to meet your audience where they are, without sacrificing fundamentally who you are, right? Like, so do you have to wear big earrings every day? Yeah, probably not, right? But maybe there is something you can, you know, accessorize with that is not traditional. That for me, like, I love to see little reminders of who I am on my body, right? And so even in those interviews, if I'm not, you know, maybe if I have my hair pulled back, you know, maybe I have something else that's reminding me of who I am, and maybe they don't notice it, but I know about it, right? And so, you know, my personality type is not to subscribe to, you know, swinging the pendulum the whole way. Like, so if she said wear pearls and wear a suit, I'm not wearing a suit and I'm not wearing pearls, but I will come, you know, in something that is pared down, that will allow people to see me and not be distracted.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think it's helpful. And I think it reminds me that it's all about the balance, and it's about having some touch point that reminds you of why you are doing what you're doing. The fact that it's not, you haven't permanently changed yourself. it's okay. Like, you're going to go right back to being whoever you are in your regular real life. But for the purpose of almost like playing that game for a moment, you sometimes do need to modify, but having that thing that is still authentically you can kind of help you keep your sanity. So that's helpful.
Yep.
And also, one of the things that I think is important, what you said, Michaela, is that we have to remember there's also a generational difference, that many of the women that I have now met in my later years, and I'm turning the corner into 18 years, and so I still have a lot of learning in the game. There's folks who've been in it 20 plus years. They just grew up in the business differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Set of rules, and and not pushing against those in very visible ways, because folks are always pushing, but not in very visible ways. They just handle things a little bit differently. And so when you get advice, I always try to think about it in context. I also have friends who are about 5 years older than me, who, one of my best friends in the world, she'll always say, I'm your most conservative friend when it comes to work. And so when I'm putting an idea out there, or when I'm thinking about something I want to do or a way I want to present myself, she would also give me that similar advice. And I remember when I was working for an organization out in California, I remember she said to me, this is years ago, child, pick a struggle. You either going to have tall heels, bright glasses, or big hair. Like, I mean, like, you just, like, all the things. This is a lot of things happening right now. And I was fresh to death, okay? Like, I was all the way down. I love that a Nancy. Yes, I love a Nancy the Spider. Play a Nancy when you have to. That's a West Indian idiom.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a West Indian idiom. Reveal yourself. Reveal yourself. I love it, Nicole. But honestly, like, we have to, I think that's why it's so important, Nneka, when you talk about authenticity, to really know where you are on that spectrum, and to know what is really important to you, and also like what you're still grappling with. Because the reality of the situation is we've been told a whole lot of stuff by our mamas, by our own friends, by our boyfriends, girlfriends, lovers, loved ones, you name it, forever. And that's like a ball of yarn. And we're just like a cat trying to unravel it. Absolutely. And so, you talk about that a lot. I always feel like when I listen to you talk, Nneka, I'm always like, if I could just get a teaspoon full of this level of, like, I want you to know that in my spirit, 6 generations deep of this blackness is excellence. And I'm like, my mama never really said any version of this to me, never. So when was I supposed to get that again?
That's really interesting that you say that. So which makes it interesting for me because, when I think back on my childhood, I grew up in like the essence of Black power. Like, my people were on the front lines, and Black was beautiful, and it looked like a whole bunch of different things because we just, every shade, straight hair, wavy hair, kinky hair, didn't matter, right? And we loved it all. And it wasn't until I entered school, right? The white world. I grew up in a predominantly white environment outside of my home, that these other messages were given to me, right? And it's interesting that those messages were so powerful. And, when I started wearing my hair natural, I can remember the internal dealings that I had to have with myself, because I had to decide, am I going to be okay with little white children staring at me in the restaurant with their mouths open because they've never seen an afro before, right? Like, over and over again, comments, various things, right? I had to deal with myself on that and think about why I was wearing my hair that way. Like, this is the way God created my hair. If I just let it grow naturally and walk out into this world, there's going to be issues. That is a fundamental issue. That's a problem. And so I think in the exploration of that, pieces of my identity were refreshed, and I became very clear about the things that I want to portray as a part of my identity to everybody, the people who appreciate and the people who don't.
I need you to teach a master class on that. Let me tell you what. Drop it in the chat if you're like, I'm gonna come to the master class on that. Not because we are not capable, y'all, but because I just feel like that sits on the periphery of the things we know we're supposed to do. But I'm still sort of grasping a little bit. I'm like, I normally say, don't fake it till you make it, because that makes you exhausted. But I'm gonna fake that one. But I would like to be there. Look, oh no, we have people already saying, hello, I'm here for the master class. Like, step 1, here's what you need to do. Step 2, and here's how you have, because Nneka, like, she will break you down pull out the textbook, the scripture if you need it, the poetry if you need it. And I'm just like, where's the tome of information that I need to learn so that I can be versed?
So you are cracking me up right now, Kish, because like, I'm not going to read the whole poem, but I have a piece that I just have to end on. Like, I can't even believe it. I'm like, but I must. I must. Because I really, this is my message to my sisters. That is not mine. It's Audre Lorde's. And I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm only going to read the last portion. Is that okay? We have enough time?
Of course, we do. And then we have a special treat at the end of this, so I love it. Go ahead.
Okay. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard, nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
Woo! Look, y'all, I need a drink. I mean, I've been drinking this water, and I'm just like, God, it's just a little sambuca in this. That was so powerful. I just want us to sit with it. Yes, people say I need a cocktail. I need to pick up the chat. Look, yes. Naima said, "Oh Lord, Audre Lorde." Yes, Jacqueline says, "And yet we are here." Nicole says, "Bookend." Rochelle says, "I need a cocktail." It's powerful. Kiana says, "Yes." Sharice is like, "Open my." First of all, I can always depend on Sharice to have a wine. Okay, like that's my friend.
That's my girl.
And I just want each of us to take from this part of being authentic. Like, all of us are not the same. I think that one of the day-to-day challenges that we have, and what that poem just kind of spoke up to me, is that we hold so much. We cry out to be individuals, and at the same time, we rest with this community weight that we have to carry, and everybody ain't for everybody. And so just for us to use this opportunity, there are now 260 something women in the group as of today, which is such a blessing, and still about 20 something more waiting to get in. I need folks, tell your friends to answer the questions. Otherwise, we're not verifying them. Okay.
Who, me?
Not just you. I found your people. Like, we send them notes. We know it's sitting in other, and they're gonna see it 2 weeks from now. They're like, "Well, I tried to join the group, but nobody got back to me." Ask them to check their other mailbox. If they did not answer the question, friends, we are not letting them in. Okay, but there are women who are here, who are dope, who are ready, who are the other side of your bread. Okay, who are the yin to your yang, your cookie. Like, start talking to folks. Look everybody up. Just ask questions. Be curious. We said that a couple of times tonight. Because part of being authentic and being yourself is there's safety in that, and being able to understand that you are in a safe space and also a brave space, and that everybody doesn't think the same. We have a diversity of this is a group where we have a diversity of thought. Hello. And also different socioeconomic backgrounds with our members who are in Canada, and our members who are in the UK, and our members who are in the different islands, US, all over the place. So as we grow, just continue to stretch into each other. So Nneka, thank you so much for giving us just a touch introduction. We already said people have said they bringing wine to the masterclass, so we're gonna be drunk and woke.
Yes.
And sending angry emails to people. Not angry, pointed.
Y'all curious emails. curious emails, because you can't be angry yet curious.
I wonder. That's when you know. I wonder. Maybe. You know, if we could consider. Yes, those are the words that y'all know the words we use. I love it. Thank you so much, my friend. Okay, y'all, it's 8:43. We have a special treat. We're going to see if we can roll up out of here at 9 o'clock. And so we had offered to do branding hot seats. Let me see if I can make Rochelle a, hold on, Rochelle, I'm moving you to panelist, to do a hot seat for branding. And so Rochelle has a really quick tidbit for us for tonight around just really reinforcing what we have been learning tonight and over the last couple of weeks, and just the information that's going to keep coming. So just hang on with us for a few more minutes. Nneka, thank you so much. Tamisha just said this was very helpful. Dominique says, thank you, all caps. Nicole said, yes, my sister, representing all the time. Denzel says, thank you, Nneka. I loved it all. Jacqueline says, thank you. Kashana, hey, Kashana, says, thank you. You know, so we are just in gratitude to all of you. Michaela says, Nneka, you are wisdom embodied. Thank you. Naima says, thank you. This was phenomenal. Listen, y'all, we have some powerhouses in our group, okay? And if you're sitting right now in your house, because we know everybody's home, thinking to yourself that you don't have something to offer, let me lean in close. Y'all know I don't got no makeup on, so let me lean in. You have a gift, and we want it. And if you're not sure what your gift is, we still want it, so you can flex it, figure it out, and work it out amongst family so that we can go out into the world and show up powerfully and get paid. Hey, I'm here for the coin. Okay? So I want to make sure that you all know that if you want to try out a topic, if you want to try out a concept, if you want to teach something, if you have a testimony, y'all can go on ahead and just record it. And when the minute you press in, it comes to all of the admins for us to approve. And we post those things. Things are tagged up properly. This is an opportunity for y'all to flex those skills, to build your catalog as a thought leader. These videos will be available for y'all to be able to leverage the way you need to. So make sure you are leveraging this community. That's what it's about. And it's only going to be as active and as dope as we make it. Okay, we're right at 8:45. Kiana, you are inspiring. Yes, Naima, I told you was going to need your edge control. It didn't work. Never mind. Okay. Well, let Rochelle go on and just rip the rest of the edges off. All right. I'm going to move back to attendee. My love, Nneka, thank you so much. You are such a gift and a light. For those of you who are watching on Facebook, y'all need to give me about 2 minutes so we can stop the recording and start a fresh recording. That way people can get it in smaller sound bites, okay? But if you're on the Zoom, just hang tight for a second. We're going to keep talking, and then we are going to restart again in about 120 seconds. I'm doing it right now. Okay, Rochelle, you are on the Zooms.
Hey y'all, what's going on? What's going on? Listen, earlier today, so I don't know if you guys know this, but Kashana and I have approximately 1,726.3 repeating conversations every day. And so during our conversations, I believe that the word that I should use is they are mostly revelatory, in that we're always unearthing something. We're getting closer to something. And I believe that something is what Nneka was talking about, is what we've been talking about in this group in its entirety, which is how can I be my most potent, most valued, and most respected self? And as I am a woman who is unfortunately cast out into the single streets and forced to use some of these dating applications, it occurred to me that it would be really helpful for all of you as it pertains to the topic of personal branding, for me to liken personal branding unto your dating profile. Now, some of you guys are making it last forever. And you don't know what it's like in these digital dating streets. But I have to tell you that it is quite interesting and it is quite entertaining. Some of us, like Kashana, use.
Naima said dating during Rona times.
Oh yes, because guess what? You know what we're doing? We're doing Zoom dates. Okay. Yeah. The brother can send you Postmates, Uber Eats.
Yes.
You know, he can look up a drink cocktail for you on the internet and slide it on over. He can do a good body roll in the chat. And so I wanted to use this as an opportunity for levity because we've had some powerful sisters come on, and I want you guys to still feel that. But I put together a quick presentation inside of Canva. I'm not gonna even turn it on I will. I'll hit the present button for y'all. Here we go.
Wait, Rochelle, give me 1 second because I think Kiana has a question. Let me Kiana, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm lowering your hand now. What is your question related to this section, or did you have a comment from the last one?
I have neither. I have no idea what I just did. So.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and present my screen. If you guys need help with Canva, just let me know. We can definitely do a Canva masterclass here in the group, showing you all the new and innovative and creative ways to use Canva. So this is the personal brand dating profile. So before I just jump all the way in, I want you guys to understand that in online dating, okay, there are archetypes. There are a couple of archetypes that show up frequently. And the reason why it's important for me to point these out to you guys is because sometimes I think we fall into some archetypes. As I was listening to some of the speakers today, I recognize that when you have an older colleague tell you that you can't dress a certain way or that you shouldn't speak a certain way, or you have a boss that may be tone deaf and myopic, basically what they're saying is that these are the molds in which you can fit successfully in order for me to feel most comfortable. Okay, and so our main objective in cultivating our personal brand is to not be stymied by these archetypes and these stereotypes that people want us to embrace, which effectively dims our glow and stops us from cultivating a brand that's going to attract the opportunities that we really want to be successful, right? So we're not pandering towards any particular archetype here. So the first thing I want you to pay attention to is that the anatomy of a good dating profile and the anatomy of a good personal brand is all about your visuals, your value, and your voice. We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time doing a deep dive into anything. This is just a presentation to help prick your ear, to get you thinking about a little bit deeper the areas that you need to cultivate in order to be able to really hone in on who you are and cultivate that really magnetic personal brand. So today we're going to really focus more towards the values and the voice. Okay. So I'm sorry, guys. Here we go. That's it. So what we're going to do is start with your desires. What is the thing that is super important to you? What are the things that are super important to you? On a dating profile, when you're writing that message and setting it up so that when people start swiping me, they know exactly who you are and what you're about, you lead with the things that are valuable to you. What this is are you back?
Rochelle,
yes.
Something is happening with your audio. Say something again.
Testing 1 2 1 2. Can you guys hear me?
Oh,
Yep.
it's better now.
We don't know what happened.
Okay.
So from like the beginning of this slide, we couldn't hear anything you said.
Oh no. Okay. I'm going to lean in. Let me just make sure that I close everything else out, you guys, so that this is are Are y'all seeing all this?
We can hear you. See, yeah, just stop screen sharing.
Okay. Stop share. I'm just gonna close everything down. So that you guys don't, because sometimes Zoom